أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. The chapter now, we're on chapter 4, which is a chapter of the way to carry the Islamic da'wah. So this chapter is talking about what it means to carry Islam, what the characteristics of a person who carries Islam, especially somebody who's working for societal ideological change, what we all have to understand in order to be able to handle the difficulties, as well as what the work itself requires. So we'll begin. The Muslims did not lag behind the world due to their adherence to Islam. On the contrary, their regression commenced the day they abandoned this adherence to Islam and they allowed the foreign culture to enter their lands and the Western concepts to occupy their minds. They declined when they abandoned the intellectual leadership of Islam, neglected its da'wah, and misapplied its rules. Therefore, the Muslims must resume the Islamic way of life if they want the revival to occur. However, they will not be able to resume the Islamic way of life unless they carry the Islamic da'wah by carrying the intellectual leadership of Islam and establish by this da'wah an Islamic state, which in turn will carry the intellectual leadership of Islam by carrying the Islamic call. It should be noted that carrying the intellectual leadership by carrying the Islamic da'wah in order to revive the Muslims is undertaken because Islam alone can reform the world, and the true revival cannot be achieved without Islam, whether for the Muslims or others. It is on this basis that the da'wah should be carried out. The da'wah must be carried to the world as an intellectual leadership from which all systems emanate, and upon this leadership all thoughts are built, and from which such thoughts emanate all the concepts that influence one's viewpoint in life without exception. So these are things that we've covered in the previous chapters. The da'wah should be carried today as it was delivered in the past. It should proceed in compliance with the example of the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, without the slightest deviation from that method in its general and specific details. No regard should be given to the difference in time, for this difference amounts to nothing more than the means and the forms. However, the essence and the reality of life have not and will not change, regardless of the passing of ages and changing of people and places. So the thing here is to understand, so when we're talking about the method of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam to bring about change, so I'm going to touch on that briefly. Most people who are going to be studying this book were already familiar with the method, but for those who aren't familiar or those who want maybe a little more precision, this is basically what it is. In order to change a society, there are generally three things that have to change in that society. The first thing that has to change is that society has to want a new way of life. So the people have to want a different set of laws, a different set of ways of organizing their life. Because you remember, we talked about in the previous chapter what a society is composed of, which is not just individuals. That's what capitalism says, and it's wrong. What the correct understanding is that a society is composed of individuals, as well as common ideas on how to live their life, the laws and the way of life, as well as emotions that are in line with all of that, as well as a government that's in place to ensure that that's applied. So in order to change a society, you have to change the people's perspective of how they want to live. The people themselves have to want to live in a different way of life. So they have to believe that the way they're currently living is not right, and that they want a better way of life. The second thing that has to change is that the people the loyalty that people have for the current government, for the current leadership, has to be disconnected. So the people cannot be loyal to the current system or the current rulers. So a disassociation has to happen. So in the Muslim lands, for example, if people are loyal to the government of Saudi Arabia, or they're loyal to the government of Turkey, like Erdogan, and so on, these things all have to be disconnected and corrected, because these are people who they don't deserve loyalty. There's people who are loyal to El-Sisi in Egypt. Of course, only the worst and most corrupt people are loyal to him. Some people might have been loyal to Imran Khan. Some people might be loyal to the government of Indonesia. Some people might be loyal to the government of Morocco. So all these loyalties have to be removed. And the people have to understand what the correct loyalty is, which is to a single central Islamic government that rules over all the Muslim lands. The third thing that has to happen, which is connected to these first two, but the military of the land has to become Muslim, or has to already be Muslim, like in the Muslim lands they're already Muslim, and they have to accept these first 2 points that the people have accepted, because the military is from the people. So what has to happen is this also has to reach the military. So it's not enough for the military to want this, because the people also have to want this, and it's not enough for the people to want this, because the military has to want it too. So in order to change a society, what you have to do is get the people to want new laws and a new way of life, You have to get them to not have any loyalty to the current system. So they want a new system, meaning a new government and a new set of leaders who will implement the new system, the new way of life. And the military has to accept this as well. So now the people and the military are hand in hand in wanting to change everything and change the system and establish a new government. That's basically the gist. Now the method is more detailed. There's 3 stages: the private stage, the public stage, and the stage of ruling and fully implementing Islam. But this is a simple way of understanding how change actually has to happen in a more in a simpler and kind of more, I wouldn't say a more practical sense, just a different way of putting it in a simple way. Thus, carrying the da'wah demands frankness, courage, strength, thought, and to challenge all that contradicts the idea and the method of Islam by facing it and exposing its falsehood, irrespective of the situation and the consequences. So the need for frankness, it means you have to be just very honest about what you're calling for. One of the problems with a lot of Muslim groups and a lot of Muslims individuals, they think that the way to bring about political change is by pretending to be working towards something within the system. So they'll pretend to be working within the Canadian system. They'll pretend to actually be loyal to it and so on. But that's not frank. You're not being honest about it. You're hiding your real intentions. What has to happen was the Prophet ﷺ taught us that the way that you change society is that you have to be very open about it. So in the Muslim lands, and remember, Hizb ut-Tahrir is working to change the Muslim lands, not the West. The West will change when the Khilafah is reestablished, but the aim right now is to fix the Muslim lands and reestablish the Khilafah there. So carrying the da'wah in the Muslim lands and everywhere, even if you're in the West and you're calling people in the Muslims in the West, or even if you're trying to explain it to the West what it is that we're trying to do, it has to be done with frankness. You have to be very honest about what you're doing, very clear. You don't use ambiguous terms. You don't try to hide your intentions. You be very, very clear. Courage is required when there's danger. If you're being threatened of arrest, you're being threatened of being called an extremist, you're being threatened of losing your job, you're being threatened of having X, Y, and Z banned, or people looking at you funny, or even people criticizing you, or people, even some masajid, Muslims or masajid might shun you or kick you out and so on. So courage means you stand up against the resistance without fear. So you go against your desire to just go along with the flow. You need to ask yourself, is this the right thing to do? If it is, then courage means you do something even though you're afraid to do it. And quite often, it is actually quite scary when you're carrying these ideas and you go to the Muslim lands, for example, and you know that they could arrest you. They they could do all sorts of things. In the West, they could come after you. They could embarrass you. They could, again, you can go to the mosque. This happened lots of times with members of the Hizb and Dawah carriers in general. They go to the masjid. The masjid says, you're not even wanted here. I know like some Muslims who lost all their friends once they started carrying this da'wah, or people found out that they're with Hizb ut-Tahrir. Especially with one sister specifically, I remember as an example, all of her friends just left her. I know a brother also that I knew personally that he lost almost all of his friends when they found out that, you're calling to this stuff. This is extremism, and people are afraid. I'm afraid of talking to you now. Strength is standing your ground constantly, right? You do it clearly. You don't compromise, and you have the strength to maintain what you have. You're not embarrassed of it. You don't shy away from it. You don't explain it in like you're a little bit embarrassed. You carry the ideas and you explain things with strength. The next one is thought, which is it has to be intellectual. You can't just yell at people and order them around. There has to be thought behind it, evidences and clear arguments, and exposing the things that are wrong, and to challenge all that contradicts Islam, basically all that contradicts what it is that you're calling to. So if you see something wrong, you challenge it. If you see somebody say we should vote in order to bring about change, you challenge that. If somebody says that that Erdogan is trying to bring about Islam, you challenge that. If somebody says that we Muslims are too weak, you challenge that. If somebody like an ignorant imam said that the Muslims, even if the Khilafah were to be reestablished, we wouldn't become a superpower, you challenge that. The same imam said that the Khilafah, the obligation of implementing Islam, isn't even in the top 20 priorities of Muslims. You challenge that. So we challenge everything that contradicts the laws and the method for applying the laws of Islam, and we expose the falsehood of everything that stands in the way. Carrying the Islamic da'wah necessitates that the ultimate sovereignty belongs to the Islamic ideology. Now, sovereignty, remember we talked about sovereignty and authority. Sovereignty is referring to who has the right to legislate. Authority has to do with who has the right to elect the ruler. So in a democracy, sovereignty belongs to the people and authority belongs to the people. So the people get to vote for their ruler, and they also are the legislators. But in Islam, The people have authority, they have the right to elect their ruler. So even under a khilafah, the khalifa is elected by the people, but sovereignty belongs to Allah, meaning laws are only allowed to be taken from the Quran and Sunnah, from Islam. So only Allah is the legislator. Regardless of whether it agrees or disagrees with the masses, or whether they accept it or reject it, or oppose it, or whether it's in accordance with the people's customs or not, none of that matters. We call people to this very simple fundamental idea, which is that sovereignty belongs to the Islamic ideology, belongs to the text of Islam, meaning to Allah Azza wa Jal. The da'wah carrier does not flatter people, meaning you don't flatter people at the expense of the truth. It is not courteous to the authorities. You don't kiss up to them and say things that they want to hear, or cares for people's customs and traditions. So people have customs and traditions that, oh, this is disrespectful, you shouldn't talk about these things, you should listen to your elders even if they're wrong. Things like this, we disregard this completely if it contradicts Islam. But of course, Islam also teaches us to respect our elders and to discuss with people with the best arguments and with intellect and so on. So these are the sorts of things. And does not give any attention to whether people will accept him or reject him. So the da'wah carrier doesn't care about whether people, even if, and I've experienced this, I've been carrying this da'wah for 25 years, and I've found that the vast majority of my time, in the early 20 years, recently, it's very clear people are accepting the ideas very, very quickly and very powerfully. But for the first 20 years or so, I remember it was mostly rejection. And that doesn't matter because the ideas are correct. So it's obvious that people are going to reject it because it requires them to reject their current lifestyle. It requires change from them. It requires commitment to a new way of life and something that a lot of people are too scared to do. So it's okay. You keep on carrying it with strength and courage, frankness, thought, and you challenge everything that's in the way. And it doesn't matter if people accept it or reject it. You're still calling to the truth. If people accept it, then they gain the benefit of it too. And if they reject it, then they lose out as well. Rather, he must adhere to the ideology alone and solely express it, paying no regard to anything except for the ideology. It is not allowed to tell the followers of other ideologies to adhere to their ideologies. You can't tell people like, oh no, it's okay, you can believe in what you believe and we believe in what we believe in. No, you're wrong. And we explain why they're wrong, why the capitalist ideology is wrong, why the communist ideology is wrong. We explain it in detail. The beliefs of people, if they're wrong, we explain things with proof and evidence, respectfully and so on, but we don't pay any mind for saying, well, I don't want to be disrespectful, so I'm not going to discuss. No, this is not respectful. This is simply weakness. It is not allowed to tell the followers of other ideologies to adhere to their ideologies. Instead, they are invited without compulsion to embrace the ideology of Islam because the da'wah requires that there be no other ideology alongside Islam and that sovereignty belongs only to Islam. So in the Muslim lands, when we're calling people, we don't allow people to say, well, you can also be nationalistic. You can also be socialist. You can also be loyal to a tyrant or an enemy of Islam or whatever else it might be. No, Islam is the only source of laws and Islam is the only solutions that we accept. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. It is He, Allah, who has sent His messenger with the guidance and the deen of truth, Islam, to make it dominant over all other ways of life, even if the polytheists and the disbelievers dislike it. The Messenger ﷺ came to this world and with his message and openly challenged the whole world. He ﷺ believed in the truth that he was ﷺ inviting the people to and declared war against the red and the black, meaning like people of all colors, i.e. everyone, irrespective of their traditions, customs, religions, doctrines, rulers, and masses. He ﷺ paid no attention to anything other than the message of Islam. He ﷺ commenced the da'wah by discrediting the false deities of Quraysh, the idols, and he challenged them in their doctrines, discredited them while he was alone, isolated, and with no helper and no weapon except his unshakable and deeply rooted conviction in Islam to which he was inviting. He ﷺ did not care for the Arabs' customs, traditions, religions, or doctrines. In this respect, he was not courteous, nor gave them any regard. So that's the point about not paying any regard to these things. It's not about being disrespectful. It's about speaking clearly. If people aren't going to like it, you still speak clearly about the truth. If people are going to reject you still speak clearly about the truth. If people say this goes against our customs, you still speak clearly about the truth. I know brothers who are getting married, and one of the customs that they had in India was to kind of bow and kiss the parent's hand, and even in some cases bow and kiss the parent's feet. So a lot of these brothers became Muslim. It's strong in their Islam, and they said, I can't bow to you because Islam forbids me from bowing to you. I'll kiss your hand, but I can't do the bow. And this will cause a huge uproar in the family. This is our tradition. This is the way we do things. You can't reject our way of life. And he would simply say, there's nothing that you can do to get me to change my mind, because this is a rule of Islam. The ideology takes precedence over everything else, whether it's in a small matter like marriage, or whether it's in a large political matter such as multiple states and so on and so forth, like having more than one government, which is forbidden, or being loyal to a government that implements part of Islam and implements part of man-made law is also forbidden, and so on. Similarly, the da'wah carrier has to challenge everything. This includes challenging the customs, traditions, erroneous thoughts and concepts, the public opinion when it's wrong. Even if he has to struggle against it, he has to challenge the doctrines and religions, despite the fact that he might be exposed to the fanaticism of the followers and the hostility of those who stick to their distortions. This is a really interesting thing, because the thing is that people treat Muslims who stick to their beliefs and are very, very firm on their beliefs as fanatics. That's not the fanatic. The fanatic is a person who rejects something that they know makes sense, and especially if they know that it's true, just because they're deeply attached to it. They're attached to their certain way of life. They're attached to their nationalism. So you come and say that this is wrong. Like an example that maybe a lot of you won't be able to relate to, but with Jamal Abdel Nasser, the ruler of Egypt many decades ago, people were very much in love with him, and they loved Arab nationalism. Members of Hizb ut-Tahrir went out and said that Jamal Abdel Nasser is a traitor and an agent. He's an employee of the United States, and he's there to implement American policies, and Arab nationalism is haram. The members of Hizb ut-Tahrir were actually physically attacked. They were beaten and slapped and of course, verbally abused and kicked out. There's lots of other situations, like, for example, Al-Sudais, very famous reciter of the Quran in Egypt. The man is a traitor and a sellout to the Saudi government. Many years ago, of course, anyone who's been aware of the political situation in the Muslim lands knows his situation. So many years ago, about like 12, 13 years ago, I remember there was a video that came out where Al-Sudais was visiting a masjid. I think it was in Palestine, I think at the time, or something, Jordan or something like that. And so, but it might have been in the West, and there was a lot of Jordanians there because the person was speaking in Arabic in a Jordanian accent. And he was calling out to Al-Sudais, calling out against, like, exposing the things that he did that indicated his treachery and his selling out to the Saudi government. And so the man was attacked, not Sudais, not the traitor, not the person who we know had betrayed Allah and his messenger. No, the person who was speaking the truth was attacked. And this happens all over the world. There's lots and lots of examples, countless examples, where somebody stands up and says, Erdogan is working with the Zionists. He is funding them. He's buying weapons. He's selling weapons to them. And everyone used to attack them and say that, they weren't even allowed to speak in the masjid anymore because you're speaking out against Erdogan, and Erdogan's a hero. What have you done? Things like this. So the dawah carrier has to challenge everything. And it even if people are going to get annoyed with you and so on, that doesn't matter. Delivering the da'wah requires a concern for the complete implementation of the rules of Islam without the slightest concession. This is an important point. The hard thing for human beings is to refuse concession. Now, if Islam allows a concession, like, for example, somebody says, I want to go and have kebab today, and then the person's like, no, let's go and have, roasted chicken. And the person's like, no, I absolutely demand that I have. Islam says you can, it doesn't matter. You can concede on this one. Okay, fine, let's go have chicken. So things that are halal, mubah, permissible, we concede on, not a problem. But the things that are demanded by Islam, like the full implementation of Islam, the removal of the borders, the unity under a single Khalifa, the liberation of Palestine, the liberation of Kashmir, the liberation of all the lands that are being attacked and oppressed or occupied and so on, there's no concession on these things. We can't ask for a two-state solution. We can't accept international law. We can't accept man-made law or the so-called freedoms and so on, because all these things are concessions on things that Islam forbids entirely and categorically. So we are not allowed to accept any sort of concessions or compromises on these sorts of things. So even if we face a hostility, and I personally have faced, and I've seen, again, 25 years of so many, countless Muslims attacked for just simply saying basic things. I'll give you an example, like from myself. One of the examples that happened in my own city was that when the election was going on for Justin Trudeau, between Harper and Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau, I was telling people that, first of all, the man's a clown. He's an ignoramus. He's not politically savvy. He's really just riding on his father's coattails. But that's not even the point. The point is Islam forbids Muslims from electing somebody who will legislate with other than what Islam has revealed. So I was handing out leaflets with some other members of Hizb ut-Tahrir, and we're just simply telling people, look, there's another opinion. So some people in the community are saying, you have to vote. It's required, it's obligatory, you must, or else we're all going to die. And then we're saying, okay, but Islam forbids this. And here are the evidences. But despite the fact that all we were saying, we're just saying these are evidences that you can look at. and at least consider both sides, and then you can make a decision. The imam came out running, trying to stop us. A man at one point in time grabbed the leaflets from us and was trying to rip them up. Some people were screaming at us to leave the masjid. At one point, the imam threatened a restraining order to not allow us even anywhere near the masjid, 100 meters from the masjid, for just saying Islam says you can't elect somebody who's going to rule with other than what Islam has revealed. That's it. So there are people who are fanatics, who are attached to the corrupt system because they have interests, they have a paycheck to protect, they have influences or a plan that they want to influence government or become like the clergy of the government or whatever other garbage idea that they have, because they lack a vision. They don't understand what Islam tells them to do of how to fix a situation. They want to fit themselves within the vision of the kuffar, of the colonialists. The people who went to our lands and destroyed our lands and killed our people, they have a vision of nationalism and loyalty to Canadian values and American values and British values and all this garbage. And then they teach us that you should also be loyal to being an Iraqi and Egyptian, be loyal to your borders, and you can't cross your borders. And what's happening in Palestine is a foreign issue. So all these things now are collapsing, by the way. So Muslims are really starting to wake up, especially with what the Zionists did. Alhamdulillah, Muslims have woken up. Like the Zionists are doing us a huge favor. Again, may Allah Azza wa Jal help the Muslims in Gaza from the horrible things that they're facing. But what's happening in terms of a silver lining on this horrible dark cloud is that Muslims are waking up to the reality of what's really going on. They're realizing that there's no hope in the West, and our governments are all traitors, and there's no hope in any of them. And our armies are right now imprisoned behind the prison walls, the prison bars of nationalism, and the prison guards, what do you call them? Like the head guard, I forget what, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the position. The warden are the rulers. And so this is what's happening as the Muslims are waking up. So we will see a lot of fanaticism by people who are attached to the status quo and they don't want to change. You'll find right-wing nationalists. I remember even to the extent that there was for a long time in Canada, there was a lot of attacks on my pages and on myself, and even there was a hilarious protest in London where they were like holding placards with my face on it and protesting me for some strange reason. And I remember I met one of them. I went to the Mississauga, I think it was a Mississauga Eid event, and there was a guy there who, one of those people who was very well known. So I remember I met with him and I had a conversation with him, and I told him that your problem is not with Muslims, your problem is not with the laws of Islam. The conflict between us is that I'm an anti-secularist and you are a secularist, because he's like Canadian values and Canada and the flag and whatever. I told him it's not even about any of these things. You're a secularist and I'm an anti-secularist, and I'm calling people to implement Islam in the Muslim lands, but I'm saying as an idea, secularism is wrong. Whereas for you are threatened by that thought, and you're attached to secularism, despite the fact that he hasn't really thought it out, because secularism is a nonsensical idea. God exists, created the whole universe, but he's unable to know how to organize our life. So we talked about that again in chapter 1 and 2 and 3, actually. So he actually ended up just totally stopping. Like he was arguing whatever, but when I said that, he stopped and said, "You're right." He understood then what it was that he was doing. So these are people who are like, when you call them fanatics, they're attached to something almost irrationally. Whereas as for us as Muslims, there are a lot of Muslims who are attached to Islam and they're yelling and screaming and they don't have thought. That's why thought is part of the da'wah carrier's tools. You have to be able to discuss with evidence and thought, and you think about what other people are saying too, and consider their arguments, and consider maybe they're right on some parts and maybe they're wrong. Of course, they're wrong on most parts or all. So it's a matter of thinking about things and discussing things with evidence. So delivering the da'wah requires a concern for the complete implementation of the rules of Islam without the slightest concession. The carrier does not accept any truce nor concession, negligence or postponement. Instead, he maintains the matter as a whole and definitely settles it immediately. He does not accept any intercession which would obstruct the truth. Rasulullah ﷺ did not accept the request that Thaqif's delegation would be allowed to retain their idol, Allat, for 3. It has nothing to do with Allah. Allat is mentioned in the Quran. It's one of the idols it's Alif Lam Alif Ta Marbuta. So Allat is a completely different word. For 3 years before it was demolished, because he said that it must be demolished immediately. He did not exempt them from prayer as a precondition for embracing Islam. They said, we'll become Muslim, but we don't want to pray for 3 years. He rejected that. He also refused to leave Allat for 2 years or even for 1 month. as they demanded. He refused this request firmly and decisively, without any hesitation or leniency. This is because man has to either believe or not believe. After all, the result is either heaven or hell, Jannah or Jahannam. However, Rasulullah ﷺ did accept the request to not have them demolish their idol with their own hands. Instead, he asked Abu Sufyan and Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah to demolish it for them. He definitely did not accept anything less than the complete aqidah and what it requires of implementation. As for the means and forms of carrying this implementation, Rasulullah ﷺ accepted them because they are not connected with the nature of the Islamic aqidah. Therefore, care must be taken in delivering the Islamic da'wah to preserve the completeness of the idea and the completeness of its implementation without any compromise in the fikrah and tariqah. There is no harm in using any means that it demands. So what we mean by this is, when we're talking about the method, we talk about the method of changing people's, working against the way of life, so people want a different way of life, and to detach and disconnect and basically shatter political loyalties to rulers and systems, and for the army to accept this as well. Again, we're talking in the Muslim lands. Now, how you do that, these are the wasa'il, these are the means. So you can talk to people directly, you can use leaflets, you can use videos, you can use projections on sides of walls, you can use protests, lots of ways to get that across. Same with the second, same with the third. You can use all sorts of means. So the means can change, but the rule on you have to do X, you have to do it. But how you do it, these are up to us based on the time and the place. Carrying the Islamic da'wah necessitates that every one of its actions be undertaken for a specific objective. The carrier should always be aware of this aim and work towards achieving it, exerting himself relentlessly to fulfill it. Therefore, the carrier would not be satisfied by thought without action, and would deem it to be a hypnotic and fanciful philosophy. So we don't just simply discuss ideas and we don't actually try to put it in place. So we don't just sit there and only put out ideas, but we don't actually put it into practice in terms of trying to change society. Rather, everything has to be applied and practical with goals and aims and objectives and timelines on how we're going to achieve things. And if we don't, we review and so on and so forth. Everything has to be practical and in action and actually trying to change the situation in the Muslim lands to actually take power and remove the rulers and unite the Muslim lands and all our resources under a single Khalifa. We wouldn't be satisfied with thought and action devoid of any objective, considering this to be a spiral motion which ultimately ends in apathy and despair. Instead, the da'wah carrier has to insist upon connecting the thought with action and uniting the two in working for a specific objective, which will be fulfilled in a practical manner and be brought into existence. Rasulullah ﷺ carried the intellectual leadership of Islam in Mecca. When he realized that the society would not make Islam the system of society, he began preparing the society in Medina. In Medina, he established the state, thereby implementing Islam, carried his message, and prepared the Ummah to convey it after him and proceeded in the same way he had traced. Therefore, carrying the Islamic da'wah in the situation where there's no Khalifa should include the call for Islam and the resumption of the Islamic way of life by working to establish the Islamic state which implements Islam and carries its message to the world. Thus, the da'wah is transferred then from a call within the Ummah to resume the Islamic way of life to a call to the world carried out by the Islamic State, and from a local da'wah within the Islamic world to a universal da'wah. The point here is, first of all, the da'wah is not restricted to a particular land. Mecca is the most important and sacred land on the face of the earth, and Medina at the time wasn't anything at all. So let's not forget that. It was Yathrib, it wasn't Al-Madinah al-Munawwara. So this idea that we have to focus on, let's say, only Saudi or certain things, certain lands, no, it's about practicality. So when we look at the Muslim lands, the reason why we focus on the Muslim lands is because, as I mentioned, the three components, the third component is for the army to accept the ideas. They have to be Muslim, and they have to accept the ideas of wanting the Islamic way of life and to have no loyalty to any political system or rulers. So in order to do that in the West, you'd have to get the whole army to become Muslim, the whole society to want Islam. It's just way too unnecessarily large of a task when that's almost entirely achieved in the Muslim lands already. And that's why we focus on the Muslim lands. The second point here is that the da'wah changes from a local, so we're focused on the Muslim lands right now. Once the Khilafah is reestablished, it becomes a global call for the lands of the world to join the Khilafah. And the Khilafah, of course, there's lots of details about how that's done. The call to Islam should clearly include correcting the prevalent doctrines, strengthening the relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, and it should provide solutions for the problems of the people, so that the da'wah becomes vivid in all fields of life. The Prophet ﷺ would recite to the people of Mecca the following verse, Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. as well as إنه لقول رسول كريم وما هو بقول شاعر قليلا ما تؤمنون, as well as وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون الذين إذا اكتالوا sorry, that seems to be swapped around. الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون ويل يومئذ ويل. So subhanallah, this Arabic verse is mixed up. I'm going to have to send in an update to get it fixed. ويل للمطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون. So it's actually the last two is the first, and then this, and then that. Anyway, so wail is like, it's saying, it's a threat of punishment. It's saying, in English you say woe to you, but it doesn't really work in English. People don't talk like that anymore. So it's saying you are in so much, there's a great punishment coming your way to those who deal with fraud. Those who have, when they're selling, they steal from people, they play with the weights in order to get more. But if they go to the market to buy something, they check everything and make sure everything is the exact measure. So it's not like they mess with this and they know, okay, well, it's part of things, so I'll let you mess around too and have some balance at least. No, when they are selling, they steal, and when they go do business, they check everything and they make sure nothing is taken from them. Allah Azza says, إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ذلك الفوز الكبير. Or sorry, I think I didn't translate the first couple of verses. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب means death to the two hands of Abu Lahab. Abu Lahab was one of the leaders of Mecca. So this is an attack on the rulers. So imagine, again, in any one of our situations where if a verse was revealed during our time, and let's say the struggle was going on now, and the verse was revealed about the ruler of that land where the Prophet lives, and attacking the rulers, and attacking the ministers, and attacking the senators, and attacking the governors, and all the corrupt politicians. So this ayah was attacking one of the rulers, one of the most senior rulers of Quraysh, death to his two hands. And then the ayah continues that all of his wealth will amount to nothing, and his wife is simply a backbiting troublemaker who causes trouble in society. Both of them will be thrown in the hellfire, and his wife will have a rope made of, basically it's a really harsh rope with thorns wrapped around her neck. The ayah here says, this message is true. So this is a political ayah. The next ayah is إنه لقول رسول كريم. This is these are the words of an honored prophet and messenger. It's not the words of a poet. How little you believe and how little you understand. So it's talking about the aqidah, the elements of belief, and then here it's talking about the economy, marketplace trade. A great punishment is coming for those who deal in fraud. Those who, when they are selling, they mess with the scales, but when they go and buy, they make sure everything is exact. And then again, it goes to the aqidah again, iman, which is those who believe and do good deeds. For them is heaven, Jannah, under which rivers flow. That is the great reward. And then in Medina, when he entered Medina, he would also recite وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, pray salah and give zakah. And also أَنْفِرُوا خِفَافًا وَثِقَالًا, right? Fight, go to join the military and fight, whether you have little weapons or lots of weapons. وَجَاهِدُوا بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ, and fight jihad with using your wealth as well as your physical bodies, فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, for the sake of Allah. And he would recite, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَى أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. O you who believe, and this is an economic ayah, O you who believe, if you are going to borrow money, write down a contract. And then the next ayah is كَيْ لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ. So this is again an economic ayah, which is referring to zakah being taken out of people's money, 2.5% of your excess wealth, so that money doesn't only circulate among the wealthy, which is what you see today. Money is circulating among the wealthy, and all the money is being sucked up. As well as the ayah, لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. Those who go to Jahannam, the hellfire, and those who go to Jannah, heaven, are not equal. Those who go to heaven are the winners. So it's talking about aqeedah, it's talking about iman. Accordingly, the Islamic da'wah should carry to the people the system by which they are to solve their daily problems. This is because the secret to the success of the Islamic da'wah is that it is vivid and addresses man in a comprehensive manner as a human being, thereby bringing about a comprehensive and radical change in him. Basically, when we're carrying the da'wah, what we're doing is we're talking about all elements of Islam: belief, economics, politics, marriage, character, akhlaq, good manners, and so on. And so it's calling for the Islamic ideology as a whole. It is impossible for the Islamic da'wah carriers or for the da'wah carriers to carry out the responsibility and to effectively discharge their duties unless they rooted within themselves the motivation towards perfection and completeness, meaning in their iman, in their relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal. They should constantly search for the truth, continuously scrutinize all that they know in order to purify their understandings of issues from any alien thoughts and remove away from these understandings anything close to them that might possibly stick to them from corrupt thoughts. This will keep the idea they carry pure and clear. The purity and clarity of the thoughts is the only guarantee for Islam's success and the continuity of success. The meaning of purity and clarity is purity means that you carry ideas that don't have any ideas from outside the ideology, so from capitalism or communism / socialism, and clarity is you know all your evidences. So you're not just saying we should do this and you don't know. This is halal, you don't know the evidences. You say this is haram, you don't know. It's not about not knowing the logic. We're talking about the evidences. What ayah, what hadith say this? You have to be able to prove it. So that's clarity. And the purity is not having anything mixed in, like when you talk about human rights and you say Islamic human rights or Islamic feminism, or this is impure. These are ideas that come from the capitalist system. Islam has its own perspective on rights, its own perspective on women and on men and on everything. So the purity is to only take from the ideology of Islam. The da'wah carriers have to carry this duty as an obligation from Allah Azza wa Jal. They have to embark upon it enthusiastically and delightedly, expecting the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They must not seek for their work any worldly reward or expect praises from people. They must acknowledge nothing except the pursuit of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a really crucial point. When we carry da'wah, one thing I noticed with a lot of people who've been carrying da'wah for a long time especially, is that a lot of times they're so dedicated to the intellectual analysis and political assessment that they forget that the point of all of this is to please Allah Azza wa Jal. So when we do this, we have to have this enthusiasm and delight in it, this excitement, because the reward that we may get if Allah accepts our good deeds, because the reward that we may get is so immense that we were part of the work to bring back the implementation of Islam after it was removed. And this is the first time anybody has ever done this without a prophet or a messenger. So the reward, inshallah, is absolutely immense. And there's lots of ahadith that talk about the reward for such people, that hopefully we're among them, and hopefully it applies to us, which is, for example, he talks about the ahibba. He was once walking with his companions, and he said, my beloved, while he was walking. And he said, how much I can't wait to meet my beloved. And then the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, are we not your beloved, your ahibba? Because the ahibba is different than, like, it's not like saying my beloved like a woman. It's referring to my beloved like my people, a group of people that are my beloved people. So the companions with him said, O Messenger of Allah, are we not your beloved? And he said, no, you are my companions. He said, my beloved are people who have not yet been born. They find the message of Islam and they find it abandoned by people, and they believe in me without seeing me, and they basically carry Islam with strength. And these are the ones who are my beloved. He loves them very, very much. There's another narration that says that there's a group of people who are the ones who find Islam abandoned and pick it up and teach it and bring it back and restore it. And these are the best people of Iman on the Day of Judgment, alongside the prophets and messengers and angels. And lots of other hadith that are absolutely wonderful and beautiful. And so when the da'wah carrier carries these ideas, we're carrying these ideas not because we want to save the world, not because we want to be heroes, not because we want recognition, not because we want anyone to say you're a scholar, not because we want to reach power, not because we want to become a ruler or have people listen to us. None of these things. We're doing it because of the immeasurable, I don't even know how to even describe it. It's almost indescribable. It has to be indescribable, because Allah just says that the rewards in Jannah are things that no heart has ever imagined and no eye has ever seen. So the thing is about it is that the reward for those who undertake this work is something that I absolutely am excited about, but I don't know if Allah has accepted anything from me, so I don't know if I'll get it. And but the thing is, we don't even know what it is, but we know how immense it must be, because the reward for the Muslims who just do basic things is absolutely enormous. So this is the thing. The da'wah carries this with immense excitement because of the role we get to play, the honor we get to have in carrying these things. And that's the end of chapter 3, related to how to carry the Islamic da'wah. Now, this next chapter is the Islamic civilization. It's al-hadara. So the Islamic civilization is a very, very important topic when you're trying to understand what can we take from foreign systems, from foreign beliefs. For example, many times, countless times, when I'm online and I'm having a discussion about the Khilafah and the corruption of the West and the corruption of the governments and the absolute ignorance of the leadership of the West and so on. People say, well, why are you using Facebook? Why are you using a Western-made telephone? Why are you using a Western-made car? So the thing is that means that's the problem with this person, is they don't understand the meaning of the Islamic civilization, what al-hadara actually is. So in order to understand what we can take from the West, because we can take phones, we can use phones, because phones are a neutral thing. It's not a capitalist thing. It's not a communist thing. It's not an Islamic thing. It's a neutral thing. If Muslims invented it, everyone would use it. The same. Same with cars, same with airplanes. These are all neutral things. So we're going to discuss that and get into some detail about that, so we have a precise understanding of it for people who are looking towards bringing about ideological societal change. People who are looking at bringing about societal change have to have a very precise understanding of things, because we're the ones who are going to implement it. So if problems arise, we know how everything works. So we know how to fix it. But if you have just a basic understanding, you'll get confused very quickly. So there's a difference between the hadara, civilization. I'm going to use the word hadara more than I'm going to use the word civilization. Because hadara is a bit more, in Arabic, hadara, it has to do with, there's a lot to it. The Arabic word is much deeper. But anyways, I'll still go back and forth between civilization, but the word hadara. And the Madaniya. Madaniya, which is the material things, right? Madaniya is like, again, cars and computers and material things. And we'll talk about what hadara is. So the hadara constitutes the whole concept about life, whereas Madaniya means the material forms, sensed objects, of sense objects in life's affairs. So hadara are like your beliefs about what's the role of God in legislation, such as, is a human being free from the laws of God? Are we free to do anything we want? Can we insult God? These are all hadara. And also, so that's the first thing. So hadara is the concepts, the beliefs, the things related to the aqidah, the beliefs, the creed of that particular society or that particular ideology. Madaniya is any physical thing. So hadara is the ideas, Madaniya is the physical objects. While Madaniya can be specific or general. So Madaniya, that can be one of two types. So first of all, we separate them just to create clarity. Hadara is the concepts and Madaniya is the physical objects. But now you can have Madaniya that comes from hadara and Madaniya that's neutral. It doesn't come from any particular hadara. So objects that are a product of hadara, such as statues, like idols, and are specific. They're specific to a particular hadara. So they're Madaniya, physical objects that are specific to a particular belief system. While material aspects produced by science and its progress, industry and its evolution, like accounting or architecture and so on, are general and are thus not particular to a specific people or their aqidah and so on. So they're universal, like industry and science. So for example, things related to medical treatment, like Advil and Tylenol, things related to the production of polyester and spandex and these sorts of materials, the technology behind glasses, the technology behind microphones and cameras and so on. These are all Madaniya that are general. They're not related to a particular hadara. They're not related, they don't come specifically, and they are not specific to a particular viewpoint on life. They're neutral. This distinction between hadara and Madaniya must always be noted. One must also note the distinction between the Madaniya forms resulting from a hadara and the Madaniya forms resulting from science and industry. This is necessary so that when taking Madaniya, the physical things, technology, and so on, a distinction between its forms and differentiation between it and hadara must be clear. There should be no objection when acquiring the Western Madaniya resulting from science, industry, the things that are general and neutral. However, Western Madaniya resulting from the Western hadara, their way of life, their aqidah, must not be adopted on any account, because we are not allowed to adopt Western hadara, for it contradicts the Islamic hadara from the very basis upon which it is established, its point of view, and its understanding of the meanings of human happiness. The Western hadara is established upon the separation of deen or religion from life, and it from process of legislation, and it denies religion from having, or deen, from having any influence on any of life's affairs, and hence it separates religion from the state, or church from state. This separation is natural for those who separate religion from life and deny its role in life. It was on this basis that life and the system of life were built in the Western capitalist system. This hadara views the entire life as a pursuit of personal benefit. Thus, its criterion for actions in life is benefit. Therefore, benefit is the basis upon which the system is established, and the hadara is built. So benefit is the basis of the Western hadara. Okay? Benefit is the most prominent and apparent concept in a system, and in the hadara, this is because it portrays life as benefit. The only thing that matters in life is benefit. Happiness, in their view, is providing man with the maximum share of physical pleasures and furnishing him with their means. It follows that its Western hadara is established on the desire to reap benefits and gives no consideration or even recognition to anything except for benefit, thus rendering it the criterion for actions. The spiritual side is restricted to the individual and is not part of the social order. The spiritual affair of man is confined to the church and to the clergy. Consequently, there are no moral, spiritual, or humanitarian values in the Western hadara. Rather, only materialistic ones. Somebody might say, well, no, there's like humanitarian organizations. That's what they're called, non-government organizations, NGOs. The government does not undertake spiritual things or humanitarian things or moral things. Other organizations take on these things, but the government is only concerned with preserving liberties and giving everyone the maximum benefit that they can. Owing to this, humanitarian actions become affiliated to organizations separated from the state, like I just said, NGOs, such as the Red Cross and missionaries and so on. Every value, apart from the materialistic value of benefit, was excluded from life, from the organization of life on a systemic level. The Western hadara thus consists of such host of concepts about life. As for the Islamic hadara, it is established upon a basis contradicting the basis of the Western hadara. Its viewpoint about life and the meaning of happiness are different from the Western hadara. The Islamic hadara is built upon the belief in Allah Azza wa Jal, and that He has established a system for man, life, and the universe. He, subhanahu wa ta'ala, sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with Islam as the one and only deen for mankind. This means that the Islamic hadara is established on the Islamic aqidah, comprising the belief in Allah Azza wa Jal, His angels, His books, His messengers, the hereafter, and al-qada al-qadar. Thus, the aqidah is the basis of the hadara, and consequently, the hadara is founded upon a spiritual basis. So the Islamic hadara is founded on a spiritual basis, while the Western hadara, or the capitalist hadara, is established on the basis of benefit. Life in the Islamic hadara is based on the philosophy of Islam, which emanates from the Islamic doctrine, or aqidah, upon which life and actions are both established. This philosophy, which is mixing matter with spirit, we talked about this in the previous chapter, which is the meaning of mixing matter with spirit. It means you take physical objects and you live your life using all material objects according to the rules of the Creator. So you recognize that the Creator created everything, made laws for everything, and you use them within the confines of what the Creator allows, making everything spiritual, all action spiritual, and making the use of even material things spiritual. So this philosophy, which is mixing matter with spirit, i.e. making man's actions conducted by the ahkam shar'iyyah, constitutes the basis of life. While man's actions are material, his observation of his relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal when he undertakes the action as haram or halal constitutes the spirit. This means that the mixing of matter with spirit has taken place. Accordingly, the commands and prohibitions of Allah Azza wa Jal regulate the actions of a Muslim. The Muslim's ultimate objective in carrying out his actions in accordance with the commands and prohibitions of Allah Azza wa Jal is the attainment of Allah Azza wa Jal's pleasure and not benefit. So that's the core difference, is that our aim is using objects to please Allah Azza wa Jal. Whereas in capitalism, the only concern is using objects for a person's personal benefit and enjoyment. However, the immediate aim of undertaking the action is sought after value. We talked about the values before, which differs according to the type of action. The value may be materialistic for the person who engages in commerce or trade to make profit. So his trade is a materialistic action, and he is directed in that by his realization of his relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal through his commands and prohibitions for the sake of attaining Allah's pleasure. So a person will do business seeking the materialistic action, the materialistic value, but he will be aiming to please Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's how you mix matter with spirit. While the value that he aims to achieve from undertaking the action is the profit, which is the materialistic value. And that's why in the capitalist system, people often get confused. They say, well, Muslims are seeking materialistic values too. Muslims are seeking benefit too. The difference is, in the Western capitalist system, their hadara seeks benefit for the sake of benefit, pleasure for the sake of pleasure, because pleasure is the meaning of happiness and the only thing that matters in life. Whereas in Islam, we seek the materialistic and benefit gains because Allah Azza wa Jalla has allowed it, and we do it to please Allah Azza wa Jalla. So even when we gain, even when we enjoy things, even when we enjoy the pleasures of life, we earn reward while we're doing that because we're doing it because it's halal. We do it because it pleases Allah Azza wa Jalla. The value may be spiritual, such as prayer, zakah, fasting, or pilgrimage. The value may be moral, such as upholding the truth, being honest, or exhibiting loyalty. The value may be humanitarian, such as rescuing a drowning person or helping the poor. These values are noted by man or noticed by man when he undertakes the action so that he can achieve them. However, these values are neither the driving force behind man's actions nor the ultimate objective he aims to achieve. They are the values of the action that differ between the different actions. Happiness is attaining Allah's pleasure and not the fulfillment of our physical desires. Satisfying all such needs, organic needs and instinctual needs, are an essential means to preserve one's life and tranquility, but happiness is not guaranteed by their fulfillment. A person can fulfill all the desires they have in this world and they won't be happy in the end. In summary, this is the Islamic viewpoint about life, and this is the basis upon which this viewpoint is built. This viewpoint is the basis of the Islamic hadara, the Islamic civilization. It is obvious that the Islamic hadara, civilization, contradicts the Western hadara, civilization, in every sense. The Madaniyah, the physical objects resulting from hadara. So now we're going to talk about the physical objects that stem from the way of life of the ideology. So the capitalist hadara, the capitalist civilization, and the Islamic civilization. So the physical objects, the Madaniyah, that come from a particular hadara, which is specific, or rather here actually we're talking about the ones specific to the Islamic hadara. The Madaniyah object resulting from hadara, which is specific to the Islamic hadara, contradict the Madaniyah objects that come from the Western hadara. For example, a photograph by itself is an object of Madaniyah. Okay, so a photo is just a Madaniyah object. The Western hadara considers the photograph of a naked woman that reveals all of her physical nudity to be a Madaniyah object consistent with their concepts of life about women. So for them, they see such a photo, and again, pornography and so on, to be something acceptable. And it's part of their civilization. It's part of their hadara. They'll see it as art, they'll see it as beauty, they'll see it as enjoyment, they'll see it as whatever they want to see it. So they'll see this thing as an acceptable thing because it's a physical object, it's just a physical object, but because it comes from their aqeedah of freedom, the aqeedah of a separation from God's laws, and so the morality of the Creator from life, they'll see it as something that's in line with their hadara. Thus, an individual from the West views the photograph to be a piece of art, which he could take pride in. And you see lots of paintings in the West, they have naked women and so on, that they take great pride in. And a piece of art when it accomplishes artistic conditions. However, this object of Madaniyah contradicts the Islamic aqeedah and the Islamic concepts about women, which are considered as an honor that must be protected. Consequently, such photographs are to be prevented because they are seen as a moral abomination. So because they provoke the sexual drive, which triggers moral laxity in society. So it triggers the drive of a person's sexual desires to go and do things outside the bounds of Islam, because Islam says marriage. But these photographs do not promote marriage, rather they promote moral laxity, immorality, and people to have relations outside of marriage. Likewise, if a Muslim were to build a house, another object of Madaniyah, so a house is a physical object under Madaniyah, so it's physical forms, he would have to take into consideration that women inside should not be seen to those who are outside. It's a very interesting concept, which is that when Muslims build houses, if you go to the Muslim lands, like I remember specifically my house, my aunt's house especially, my own house was also, very much the same, but especially my aunt's house in Baghdad was uniquely like this. So first of all, the walls of the garden are very high. That way women can go out without wearing hijab into the yard. And they did. Women would always walk around in the backyard without wearing their hijab because nobody can see in when they're driving by. Even the next house can't. You'd fill the whole barrier between the house with trees and around the back intentionally so that nobody can look in, and so the women can be free to go outside and enjoy themselves if there's a pool or a yard or a swing and these sorts of things. So, but the house itself was really interesting. I would open the front door, and there's two more doors in front of me. One door straight ahead that goes to the family room, which is where the women would be sitting watching TV and so on without hijab. And there's another door here that was actually transparent that would go towards the guest room. And it was transparent to let people know when they come in the house, in case they get confused, which door you're supposed to go to. The transparent door, they right away know if it's transparent, it's for the guests. So the guests would know to go through that door because you can see through. This door, it's completely blocked. It has no like side windows or anything like this. Same thing for even the layout of the house. When you go through this one and you come to the guest room, from the guest room, you go straight to the back into the kitchen and then the bathroom, and then to get back to the living area, and there's two bedrooms there, there's a door. So you would go through, and then here's the kitchen and the bathroom and an area that guests can be, and they can go out to the backyard from there. But then if you wanted to come back to where the first door is, into that living area, there's a door there, so you can't go. So it preserves and protects private life. Because the Islamic hadara, the concepts about life, it says that there's a protection for private life, protection for the chastity of women, and so on. And so therefore, the design of houses the house is a Madaniyah. And so now when you look at the Western application of design of houses, you find that they'll have ceiling to floor windows. I've gone to hotels where there's ceiling to floor windows, and I can't block the view from people from the outside. You can pull down, you can close. I remember I once went with my wife to a hotel, and you can close the blinds, but there's always a little bit of an opening. I had to spend a lot of time working on this thing to kind of make sure that it's completely sealed in. And even then we had to make sure we're a certain part of the room to ensure that there was no possibility that people from the outside could see in. So this is one of the problems with the Western Hadara, the Madaniyah, that comes from the Western Hadara, which is the idea of having everything open. Not to mention, there's even more. I remember many times, many houses I've come across, you open the front door, I can see through the whole house, I can see into the bedroom from the front of the house. Some people, again, have even windows to the bedroom. Some, if you look at France and parts of Europe, they'll have bathrooms with windows in them, and so people can look into the bathroom, these sorts of things. So these are all Madaniyah, which is physical objects, material designs and so on, material things, and that come from a particular hadara, a particular civilization, a particular way of thinking about life, a particular viewpoint, a particular aqidah, a creed about why we exist, and so on. So if a Muslim were to build a house, another object of Madaniyah, he would have to take into consideration that women inside should not be seen to those outside. Accordingly, the Muslim builds around the house a wall, but the Westerner pays no attention to this. This applies to all objects of Madaniyah, which result from the Western hadara, such as statues and the like. Likewise, if clothes are specific to the disbelievers, such as like the clothes of a priest, or a bishop or something like this, the Muslims are then forbidden to wear them because they carry a specific viewpoint about life. So this comes from another aqidah, comes from another viewpoint on life. So if there's certain clothes, like even a shirt that has a beer bottle or labat or something like that on it, Muslims are forbidden from wearing this because it comes from an aqidah that says that beer is okay, and so on. Or a marijuana leaf or something like this, or even nationalism, by the way. Having a flag of a particular country on your hat or on your shirt is haram too, because it comes from a hadara that says that nation states are the standard for political systems, whereas Islam says no, only the khilafah is the standard for political systems. So we're not allowed to wear anything that depicts concepts from a hadara that's alien to Islam. However, if the clothes are otherwise, such as if they are used for wearing certain clothes for necessity of adornment and not because they are kufr beliefs, then they are considered to be of the general Madaniyah, such as these dishdashas or even a suit, by the way. So here's a good example. A lot of Muslims will say you can't wear a suit because it's looking like the kuffar. The thing is that that's not what the hukam is. Resembling the kuffar, al-tashabbuh bil-kuffar, is about dressing or acting in a way that comes from their aqidah. So if dressing in a suit and wearing a tie, it's not related to anyone's aqidah. And therefore, it's permissible for Muslims to wear suits, even though I don't really like wearing suits. But you can. And so that's a Madaniyah. That's a physical design, and it's a certain... personally, again, I don't know why women have to wear such high heels and men have to wear a noose around their neck. I realize that, it's considered to look good. But that's the thing. It's neutral. So a person can choose to do so, or a person can choose to reject it. But it's permissible to take. So it's from the general Madaniyah, which is permissible for Muslims to use. Objects of Madaniyah, which are products of science and industry, such as laboratory equipment, medical and industrial tools, furniture, carpets, etc., are all universal objects of Madaniyah. They're not related to a hadara. The use of such objects, which do not result from the hadara and are not related to it, are permissible. A cursory glance, a brief glance at the Western hadara that dominates the world today reveals that, to us, it cannot guarantee tranquility for man. On the contrary, the Western hadara is the cause of man's deep-rooted misery and suffering. This hadara, which adopts its basis, the separation of deen from life's affairs, is contradicting to man's fitrah, our nature, thus giving no weight to the spiritual aspect in society and in laws and in politics and economics and so on. It removes spirituality from that. It views life as only benefit and makes the attainment of benefit as the foundation for the relationship between human beings. Thus, it inevitably produces nothing but perpetual misery and anxiety. As long as benefit is the basis, conflict over it will naturally increase, and the reliance on force to establish relationships between people will be natural. Look at the West. It's only getting worse, and force is only getting worse because people want more benefit. The prices of housing is going up. People start fighting over it, and all the rules are being changed. People are fighting against the government now, and they're upset, and people are now losing money, and people want more benefit, so now they go out and steal cars and so on. So this is a problem with only seeking benefit. Whereas if you look at Muslims in the Muslim lands that are strong in their deen, whether they're poor or rich, whether there's a problem or no problem, the people don't start fighting each other because they're not out for benefit. They're out to please Allah Azza wa Jal. So rich or poor, their goal is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, it inevitably produces nothing but perpetual misery and anxiety. As long as benefit is the basis, conflict over it will naturally increase, and the reliance on force and so on. I just mentioned that. Thus, colonization is natural to the followers of this hadara, since benefit alone remains the basis of life, and any morals will be unstable. Because this system only seeks benefit. So when it goes to a new nation, it's only there for benefit. It's not there for anything for the good of the people. They're there for their own benefit. So colonization is the only way that they can have a relationship with foreign nations. And that's the only relationship that they have. And that's the reason why when people look at Islam spreading, they think that Islam spread also through something similar to colonialism, because these people don't know anything else. They think that this is the only way to do it. But Islam, when it spread, it didn't spread through colonization, because Islam seeks the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. So when it goes to a new nation, its approach is completely different. Hence, it is natural for any good morals to be shunned in life, in the same way that the spiritual values were neglected, and life established upon competition, struggle, aggression, and colonialism. The spiritual crisis in the people, perpetual anxiety, and widespread evil all over the world today, especially in the West, serves as a glaring and oppressively clear indictment of the result of this Western hadara. It has dominated the world and has led to such grave results, and consequently has constituted a great danger to the normal functioning of humanity. So you look at everywhere in the world, you look at how much depression exists, you look at the suicidal rates, you look at even in the militaries that are supposed to protect the people, the rate of rape of women is, I think, 60-70%, and the rate of rape of men is almost 50%. Men are being raped in the military at a rate of about 50%. So it leads to the misery of society, and just the shattering of families, and the confusion of people, and again, mass anxiety and depression. People don't know if they're male or female, and they can't even define out what a woman is. And children at the age of 5 or 6 are being taught that they could be a boy or they could be a girl, and everyone's confused. It's all leading into the abyss of misery and confusion, and that's why it has failed society. A survey of the Islamic hadara, which dominated the world from the 7th century current era until the end of the 18th century Christian era, which is the 1900s, reveals that it never had a colonialist policy. Indeed, or truly, colonialism is alien to Islam's nature, because again, when Islam goes to a new nation, we're not there to take anything from them. We're there to bring them Islam and let them have everything that they have. Colonialism is there to give them these false ideas of freedom, whatever, and to take everything from them. And if you want proof for that, look at every single nation that has ever been touched by a so-called first world nation superpower, and name one of them that actually benefited from the presence of one of those countries. Afghanistan destroyed, Iraq destroyed, Yemen destroyed, Palestine destroyed. Every single country that has ever been touched by the mercy and the generosity and the peace and freedom and human rights of the West has been destroyed, because they don't care about any of these things. They only care about benefit. They take whatever they want, And the Zionist occupation of Palestine is nothing more than colonialism. It's white supremacist colonialism. That's really what it is. It's not about Judaism or whatever. It's about capitalism. These are white capitalists that came from Europe and said that we want this land. Just like they went to India, Britain went to India, they said we want this land. They enslave the people, they kill whoever they want, and they take whatever they want. This is what colonialism does. Islam has never done this in its entire history. Colonialism is alien to Islam's nature, since we do not differentiate between Muslims and other people while ruling over them. I want to touch quickly on this idea that people say, well, look at ISIS and look at this. These are colonialist entities. You have to understand that the colonialist West is not just going to sit and allow Muslims to become independent. We have the richest and most important lands in the world. There's no way they're going to allow us to do anything without their permission. ISIS was sent in order to stop the overthrow of Bashar, because the fighters who were trying to overthrow Bashar were actually independent politically from the American setup. Every other uprising, they were able to pull them back in. Even at Al-Ikhwan Muslimin, they were able to pull them back in within the democratic setup. But these fighters who were trying to overthrow Bashar, they wanted an Islamic government, an actual independent Islamic government. And so the West tried to stop them. They couldn't stop them, so they brought in ISIS to kill Muslims. So Muslims kill Muslims, and they caused so much confusion that they saved Bashar. So you can't use these as examples to say, well, oh, look at that's what Islam does. No, you want to talk about what it looks like. Look at when the ideology of Islam was applied fully, which is from the end of the Ottoman state all the way until the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But if you really wanted to understand it, because the last 50 to 100 years were very, very bad in the Ottoman Khilafah, because it was right before it fell. So there was huge infiltration by the French and the British within the state, and they were already instilling nationalism and division, and lots of corrupt laws were being applied, or policies were being imposed, and so the state was falling apart. So if you really want to understand what it looks like, what Islamic spread, military and political spread looks like, go from the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ until 1850-ish. Right around that period, or let's say even 1800 or even 1850 is fine. That period, you look at that, you won't find anything that even slightly resembles colonialism. The Khilafah would go to a land, and that land would become so prosperous, they would become the capital, they would become the leaders, they would become our scholars. Like Baghdad, the region that I'm from, Baghdad was a Persian land. It wasn't an Arab land. Iraq was Persian. It wasn't Arab. When the Muslims reached Persia and they defeated the Persian Empire, they brought Iraq under Islam, and the people themselves became the greatest scholars of Islam, and they became the capital, and they became our leaders. So that's the thing, is that this is the truth of the spread of Islam. It's not colonialism. We call it fatah, which is Islamic opening of lands. So we open the land so people can see what Islam looks like, and people are allowed to live their lives, and they own everything. And usually great wealth is restored to them, because all the wealth that was taken by the wealthy elite is given back, because it belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to anyone else. And so thus it secured justice for all people who submitted to it throughout its reign. This is because it is a hadara, a civilization, established upon a spiritual basis, which fulfills all values. So it's on a spiritual basis, meaning we're trying to please Allah Azza wa Jal. Everything relates to that. The economy, the military, the politics, border laws, people coming in, wanting to live there. The only focus that we care about is pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal. So it fulfills all the values. So it's not just spiritual that says, oh, we're just going to pray and walk around like monks, doing tasbih, and that's it. No, it fulfills all the values, because the laws and all the systems are complete, and they come from the creator of the universe, including the materialistic value, spiritual value, moral value, and humanitarian value. The aqeedah is given the utmost importance in life, which is depicted as being governed by the commands and prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal are the most important thing. It views happiness solely as the attainment of Allah Azza wa Jal's pleasure. And as I mentioned previously in a previous part, which is we see, or rather somebody said this, and it was a really beautiful thing. He said, imagine if seeking Allah's pleasure was a state interest. It's such a wonderful thing to imagine, to really understand the shattering of secularism, which is it's a state policy to please Allah Azza wa Jal. So everything has to please Allah Azza wa Jal. That's what the laws revolve around. So the laws come from Allah Azza wa Jal, and the way we apply, we're trying to please Allah Azza wa Jal. So state interests revolve around pleasing Allah Azza wa Jal. When this Islamic hadara dominates again, and inshallah it will, as it did before, it will guarantee resolving the crises confronting the world and secure the welfare of the whole of humanity, because its solutions coming from the creator of the universe, not from a bunch of ignorant, foolish, shallow, self-centered, and biased, and incompetent, really, human beings. Jazakumullah khair. This is the end of the chapter. This next chapter is the system of Islam, which will actually talk about the actual concept of the system of Islam. And then following that, the next one is we'll go into more detail about the laws of Islam. So ahkam shar'iyya, the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and how that works as a legislative system. All these concepts about the system itself and how the system is applied and how laws are derived. We're going to go into these details so we have a good understanding of the actual system and legislative process of Islam. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.